Welcome to Calming the ADHD Family, a summit on brain hacks for a calm, confident, connected family. My name is Laura Dawn, and I am your host. I am an ADHD warrior mama to two amazing neurodiverse boys and the founder of the ADHD Village. The purpose of the ADHD Village is to wrap support around our children with ADHD. One of the first important steps in supporting our ADHD kiddos is educating the adults in their lives. ADHD is often misunderstood, especially ADHD in girls. How can we support our girls with ADHD when the adults around them may think that they are just dreamy or just fine because they keep it together all day at school, but then melt down when they get home? Teachers may often not recognize ADHD when it is the inattentive type, or if the child has developed really good coping strategies. But as parents, we know that our kids are battling with ADHD on the inside, even though on the outside they may seem just fine. To help us better understand how the ADHD presents itself in girls and how to advocate for your child in the school system, I have invited the founder of ADHD Unraveled and growth mindset ADHD coach for women, Saundra Brodkin. Welcome, Saundra.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. It's a topic I'm exceptionally passionate about.
And that's why I invited you. I know how passionate you are and how much you've really been helping women with ADHD. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about yourself and how you help families with ADHD?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so about me, on a more personal level, I was diagnosed with ADHD multiple times throughout my life, a misdiagnosis in childhood of a processing disorder, which I shouldn't say misdiagnosis, but it wasn't the full picture. And then diagnosed in adulthood. I have combined type. I'm a mom of two. My girls are 2.5 and 5 years old. And as we know, ADHD is genetic. So, yes, we are seeing clear signs and seeking out an assessment for our oldest one right now to see what's going to come of that. And I'm very interested to see that report in a couple of weeks. Um, I am the owner and founder of ADHD Unraveled. It's a group coaching program, which actually is going to be turning into a membership to be more accessible financially. And I also work with women one on one. So, how I help families in that is a lot of my clients are moms. And they either have just found out they have ADHD or they've had it for a while and they also have children with it. Um, as we know, the genetic component, it's very often when a mom has ADHD, at least one of her children do if she has multiples. Um, so I work with the parents, the mom, well, I shouldn't say the parents, I work with the mothers and help them with their executive function challenges. And that very, very much funnels into how they manage their life as um, a mom, as a career person, as a stay at home mom, whatever it is they do in their life, it has a huge impact on them and their children.
Thank you. ADHD is often missed in girls. So, as you said, when you were younger, your diagnosis was a little bit incomplete. I'm sure that there's many moms watching this interview who can relate. Many of us have been diagnosed with ADHD after our children are diagnosed. Like you said, there is that genetic component, and we often find out after we find out our kids have ADHD, and then we start noticing that we have some similar traits. Um, we may have lived our lives feeling really anxious, disorganized, depressed, overwhelmed, feeling that we have to work so much harder than other moms, wondering what is wrong with me, only to find out that we have ADHD. And for me, having a diagnosis of ADHD in my 40s was a relief because I was able to understand that my brain just works differently. Can you help us understand why we are not recognizing ADHD in girls and what is the impact of missing that diagnosis?
Yeah, so since it's a two-part question, I'll break it down. And the first part was, I believe you said why we're not recognizing it in girls, and then what's the impact.
Hmm.
So, why we're not recognizing it, and this is straight from books I've read, talks I've attended, articles I've read, etc. And many of us know the early research on the diagnostic criteria was conducted with participants that were CIS white males, and young ones. So of course the diagnostic criteria was very um, one-sided. There's not only are we looking at different genders, we're looking at different races, different ethnicities, different minority groups, transgender individuals. We're looking at non-binary people. Where there's so many people that were not considered and left out. So it was a lack of research, which has since been over the last number of years has been growing. There's been a lot of advocacy, especially women with ADHD are now in a place where we're very comfortable to speak out. Not all of us, but there are yourself, myself, where there's other people that are just comfortable speaking out, which helps raise that awareness. And there's been a lack of education in the system of teachers. And as I know, I'm a teacher originally. I always hold that part of me. I will never let go of my teacher's license. I know that you too, Lara, are a teacher. And having done a bachelor and a master's degree in education myself, I don't think I would have learned as much about neurodiversity had I not had the internal passion of wanting to help others because of the struggles I went through. My master's project was on neurodiversity, focusing specifically on autism and ADHD in the classroom. And in my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's of education, there was very little. I had one class on diversity in the classroom. It was a 4 year degree, and there was one semester with one class. So that just goes to show that it's by no fault of teachers that they are not given this. It's the system that's lacking. And I think the more we speak out, the more we bring awareness to the fact that teachers need these tools, the more likely it is that these classes and courses will be integrated into the system that is training these individuals who are essentially providing a second home for our children with ADHD. I know that it's since I graduated has changed, and there's probably more than one course now because it was a good amount of time ago. However, I know that from teachers I speak to in the school system, given that I have kids in it now, they feel undereducated and they want more. They want to know more. I'm not saying every single teacher wants to, but I think most of us who are teachers know that we don't go into teaching because it looks fun. We go into teaching because we are passionate about shaping, forming the next generation. And with that comes a passion to want to help and accommodate these children. And there's a lot of teachers out there who are really eager. They just don't have the resources. So that's another part of it, is a lack of resources, and also a lack of resources, which leads to a lack of awareness, and there's a stigma. So that's another thing. The stigma is that it's only in boys. Girls can't have it. A girl is hyperactive. Well, she just has lots of energy. She can't have ADHD. I mean, my daughter is 5, and I love her energy. And every teacher that she goes to and the psychologist that's assessing her right now have said, I just wish I could bottle up that energy. Because she runs into walls and she is always jumping. She never sits still at the dinner table. She's not sitting on her chair ever. And we're okay with that. I mean, I'm more than okay with that. As long as she's there eating in some capacity, I'm happy. Which is a challenge too, because we all know kids go through those phases. But there's a stigma around girls and ADHD, and that's the hyperactive stigma. Then there's the stigma around those who are the daydreamers and the chatterboxes. It's those are the main components. I can go on, and we could be here all day, but this is a lot of why, and the impact. The impact is big. There's mental health challenges, which you mentioned earlier. There's substance abuse later in childhood, early adolescence, into adulthood. There's incarceration. There's other health issues because executive dysfunction could lead to a lack of awareness of yourself that you need to take care of something. According to some research studies that have been done, and I am taking this straight out of, I don't have it next to me, but I did yesterday, ADHD 2.0 by Dr.
Yes.
Ned Hallowell, which I'm sure many parents on here have read. He mentioned that untreated ADHD could shave up to 21 years off someone's life. And I absolutely believe it, having ADHD myself, because there's just so many different factors that I mentioned with the mental health and the substance abuse and other health challenges, etc. When ADHD is untreated, these things are exacerbated. So I didn't expect my answer to be so long for you for that two-part question, but that's basically where it leads.
And as you were talking about that, I was just looking around for my book. It must be, I reference ADHD 2.0 all the time. It's one of my favorites, and I know exactly the study you're talking about. And 21 years.
Yeah.
That is
I,
huge.
you know what? I have it. It's actually right here. I'm wondering, and you can continue talking. I might actually have a page number where that is. And I wrote it down somewhere. But in any case, I can't find it in the moment, but it's very important to recognize the diagnosis and to also manage it.
Yeah. And like we were talking about, there's mental health impacts of not understanding. Like when you have ADHD, you know that you're a little bit different. You know that
Oh
you're
yeah.
struggling, right? And then you're left feeling like, why? But if you have a diagnosis, you have that understanding as to the why, and then you're able to put the treatments into place, which is so important to have treatment.
And something there that you said, actually, I I see so often a lack of understanding in the why, even when people know they have ADHD, because no one's really taught them what it is or what it means for them. So they know they have the label, but they don't know anything else
And that's so
other than
interesting.
the generalized conceptions of what it looks like.
And the general public doesn't have a really good understanding of what ADHD is. And often teachers, we have an understanding of what the symptoms are, you know, impulsive, talkative, hyper, out of their seats, off task, distracted. Like we can list off all these symptoms, but it really helps to understand what's actually going on inside the brain. There's so much underneath those symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Once parents have an understanding of their child's ADHD, and to get an understanding, like you mentioned, ADHD 2.0, that's a fantastic book to get you started. Another great book, right here. I think this one is really good too, Attention Difference Disorder.
Yeah.
This is by Dr. Kenny Handelman, and he talks about turning ADHD into strengths. But before you're able to turn your ADHD into a strength, you have to understand it. The parents have to understand it. Parents need to be advocating. Parents need to feel supported. The right treatment has to be in place. And once all those things are in place, then you can work on turning your ADHD into a superpower. Um,
Exactly. I would absolutely agree.
yeah. So once parents have this understanding of their child's ADHD, how should they share with the school the diagnosis and how do they start that communication?
So, are you referring to how should parents talk to the school or how should parents talk to their child?
Let's start with how they talk to their child first, and then how do they communicate with the school?
Okay. So, when talking to your child, I think that the most important piece is openness, honesty, call it as it is, um, with kindness. So, a book that I found very helpful for myself as a parent and was recommended to me by one of my closest friends who's a psychologist is The Explosive Child by, I believe, Ross Green. I was typing it in a couple seconds ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Explosive Child is, yes, by Ross Green. And I find it very, very helpful for understanding the explosive behaviors that come with ADHD and how to manage them. Because a lot of the time you can say to your child, I see you're being impulsive, but your child will have no idea what that actually means because inside they're feeling something that they, in their language, would label differently. Um, and the word label is not one that I like to use, but they would say, perhaps, I'm feeling nervous or I'm uncomfortable. I don't like the way my clothes feel on my skin. And so they're, as we would say, impulsively scratching or what have you. And understanding those behaviors allows you to ask your child the right questions to help that environment be adapted to them. And there's the famous quote or saying that when a flower isn't growing or a garden isn't growing, you don't change the flowers. You change and adapt the environment. Is there enough sunlight? Is it getting enough water? Does the soil need to be turned? Does it need new soil? So, treating our children the same way we would treat our plants, our gardens. We don't need to change our child. We need to help adapt the environment. And that's something that's really important. Um, Helping the child learn about themselves so they can help you know what you need to change in their environment. Because it's not always easy for us as parents to say, oh, yeah, I see that this is happening, which means I need to go and get this or do that. We don't. Our children are just like us, very complex, nonlinear, wonderfully beautiful humans. And it's important that we get to know those complexities without making assumptions.
I love that you compared kids to how we treat our plants. Absolutely. Um, so many times, like we see the behaviors in our children and we want to change those behaviors. But it's so important to look underneath those behaviors. So if your child is, itching your skin, like you mentioned, or maybe they're having a big angry outburst, if you look underneath the behavior, it could be a sensory issue. Or like you said, they might be feeling nervous or uncomfortable and they're um, presenting by having this explosive behavior. So understanding what's going on underneath. And
Yeah.
since you mentioned Ross Green, I love his philosophy that kids do well if they can. And if they're not doing well, there's a reason why. We need to figure out what those reasons are so we can support our kids so that they can do well. Every child wants to do well. They don't wake up in the morning and think, how am I going to make my teacher's day miserable today? I know I'll be talking out constantly.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there are kids that wake up thinking that, but why they're thinking that is because maybe they're being made to feel miserable regularly.
True.
So, but it's like you said, it's finding the reasons underneath.
And helping our kids understand what's going on in their brains and their bodies. And
Yes.
so once the family has the understanding, the parents and the child, we want to make sure, you mentioned at the very beginning that going to school is like the child's second home. That teacher is acting as a parent for the day while they're caring for the child. Yes, the
Mhm.
teacher is teaching, but there's also that element of being in place of parents while the parents aren't there. So we really need to bring teachers on board and include them in the support. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so how should parents go about advocating to the school?
So I think that there's a wide spectrum here and a lot of dependent factors. For young children, it's direct communication with the teacher, as well as encouraging your child to say, what's wrong? Tell the teacher if something's happening. I mean, not every child is capable of expressing those things. So, for ones that aren't, it's communicating with the teachers that my child has difficulty with this at home. How is it at school? What are you noticing? Having that collaborative approach from day one, or even before day one. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm one of those um, extra parents. I don't know how to describe it, but I was in touch with my teachers about, with my daughter's teachers about her challenges a couple weeks before the kids started school in September. I mean, she was going into kindergarten, first year of school, everything's new, and that communication has allowed for her to develop and grow in many ways. And it's also allowed me to maintain an open communication with the teachers. And there have been other parents who have said things along the lines of, how do you approach the teachers with this? And my response has been like parents that are friends of mine in the same class, and I have just said exactly what I did. And I email the teacher, tell them how you're feeling, ask for a phone call, for a meeting, because if they don't know you want it, they're not going to ask you for it. They've got 30 odd kids in the class, or however many are at your child's school, and if they call every parent about every symptom or sign they see, they will be calling every parent 10 times a day. And that's just, it's not realistic. So it's the parents, I guess, job to reach out to the teachers in whatever capacity and to teach your child based on their age and ability how to advocate for themselves and coach them in those situations. Do simulations and practice at home if there's a child that they have trouble with because this other child triggers them, bothers them, makes noises they don't like, what, any situation, act it out at home and teach your child healthy reactions, healthy ways to go about whatever situations could come up. And those reactions should be universal as much as possible. It's really, I mean, we could advocate for our kids till the cows come home, but we are not there with them during the day. So, teaching children how to advocate for themselves from as early on as you can is so important. And I think I have an advantage because of my background as a teacher, as a coach, having ADHD and mental health challenges from the undiagnosed ADHD. I've been teaching my kids to advocate for themselves before they could talk. Um, and sometimes it's very frustrating because they get more frustrated than I do, but it's okay, what's bothering you? And what do you want? Can you describe it? What color is it? What does it look like? Is it an animal? I'm talking about, this is a reference to something that happened with my 2-year-old last night. Um, Rather than saying, okay, I'm gonna find it for you. Like this is just an example of how you can help your child at any age. My 2.5-year-old was saying, I want my purple toy. So I have two girls. We have about 300 purple toys. And it was, okay, what room is it in? Is it an animal? And it was asking like, and I can go on with all the questions, but it was asking very direct questions to have her give me direct answers, and then telling her, okay, what is this toy used for? And then she was able to say back to me, for playing, and she was going to bed at this time. I said, is this toy for bedtime? And she was able to answer me on her own, no, but I want it. Right? So very 2-year old like, but the fact is it was teaching her those skills to understand what is used and when it's used and how to use it. And that skill is very transferable to other situations where she'll be talking to adults and being try losing my words and try to get across what she's asking for. That instance of trying to get a point across happens to all of us at some point. I mean, I'm a mom, grown, I have a business, I'm married, a homeowner, and I still have those moments of not knowing how to get a point across because our brains are very active and very busy. So, coaching our kids and that concept of trying to help her understand what toy she's looking for and describe it and when it's used and why and whatever, that concept can be applied to an 18-year-old. It can be applied to a 60-year-old. It's just a way of helping people advocate for themselves because our children need to do that. They are going to need to be their own advocates throughout their entire educational career, their jobs, any friendships, relationships, family gatherings. And the earlier you start, the better off they will be. So no matter how old your child is now, start today.
I love that tip. That's such great advice for parents to start teaching your child how to advocate for themselves so that they are able to express what they need to the teacher, or if something's not right, they can share that with the teacher. And I like how you mentioned a little bit ago about the open communication, not being afraid to let the teacher know what's going on, because as parents, you are the expert on your child and their ADHD and their needs and what strategies work. And teachers want to learn. They want to collaborate with you. They want to have as much information as possible so that your child can be successful at school. So starting that open communication is so key. I want to ask you though, sometimes we might understand our child's ADHD, and even though we might express it to the teachers, they may not see the same things that we're seeing. So I have a really specific question from one of the members of the ADHD village. Her daughter seems to be doing fine academically, and the teachers do not see any of the ADHD type behaviors at school. But at home, she melts down, and it's probably from being exhausted from keeping it together all day long and working so hard at school all day and all the struggles that she's going through. Parents are asking for an IEP with accommodations, but the teachers are saying that accommodations at school will not help with the behaviors at home. So my question for you, Saundra, are these. First, why do you think that the symptoms of ADHD are more obvious at home compared to at school? And second, can accommodations at school alleviate struggles later in the day, so when the child gets home? Third questions, I've got three. How do parents communicate this with the school? So first, why do you think the symptoms of ADHD are more obvious at home compared to at school?
Yeah, so to answer that first part, at home, I think it's very much what you said, trying to keep it together all day long, working so hard not to take even a toe out of line at school. Even if they do, but they're trying actively. And then you get home and the child feels safe, they feel comfortable, and that mask that's been on all day comes off and they just melt into whatever they're feeling. It's that all day effort leads up to the exhaustion, and when they're in that safe environment, they're comfortable to let themselves do that because mom and dad are going to love me no matter what. I could scream and yell and throw things and tear up my toys and whatever, and mom and dad are still going to love me. So yeah, that's a big piece of why it becomes more obvious at home. There's always been that expression of my kid is, and this is like from 20 years ago, let's say, my kid is a terror at home and an angel outside.
Yes.
And not that all those kids have ADHD particularly, however, it just is, it's a common theme. With ADHD, you asked specifically here if having accommodations or an IEP at school would help alleviate this. I think the answer is a very clear yes. The question is how. That's the big question, because in order for the school to be on board, they have to understand the how and the why. So how will it alleviate symptoms at home? It will allow the child to have more space to breathe at school. So I don't know what kind of accommodations they're looking for. I don't know the situation specifically. And this is where I would kind of go from a general standpoint with this kind of situation is, one, is there currently a diagnosis for anything, ADHD included, but it could be anxiety, it could be anything that would allow for the child to be eligible for an IEP. If there is a diagnosis, what symptoms of that diagnosis are present in your child that could be accommodated at school, and what would that look like? And then if you have that information, communicating it to the school and asking the teachers for that meeting, whether it be on phone, in person, through email, on Zoom, whatever method your school is doing at this time. I think the big factor here is sometimes we know our children have challenges and struggles, yet we haven't been able to achieve the diagnosis. So sometimes we ask and beg and really plead with the school to help, and the school says our resources are limited to those who have something documented. I've worked in schools for a long time, and I worked at a university most recently before I went into private practice, and I was called a learning specialist. That was my title, and I was responsible for implementing accommodations. We were not legally allowed to implement any accommodations without medical documentation. So if someone came in and says, I have ADHD, it was, okay, I can help you temporarily for the next 10 days or 2 weeks. I forget what the guidelines were, but past that, I cannot help you without medical documentation. So it's similar to the IEP. And I know in our school system where I live in Ontario, Canada, there's documentation is needed from a medical professional, whether that's a psychologist or your general practitioner or a psychiatrist. It is needed from a recognized professional that can diagnose these conditions in order to receive the accommodations. Some schools are a little more lenient in giving accommodations for children who have maybe certain behavior challenges that are not diagnosable, however, very much impacting the class. But for the most part, a diagnosis is required. So, and once there is a diagnosis, I don't know where this parent is coming from. I do know here in our school system, if there's a diagnosis, we're not allowed to refuse. That's we have a Disabilities Act here. It's called the Ontario Disabilities Act, and you can't refuse accommodations. So I think that there is some work to be done on the parents' part here in determining what is the diagnosis if there isn't already one that's been determined, and how it's affecting the child at home and in school, what can be done in school to help the child succeed in school, and what will you do at home to help the child succeed at home so that you can work together. And the piece of that that's important is showing the school and the teachers that you want to do things at home in line and collaboration with what they're doing at school, so that they see this isn't one-sided. You're not asking them to solve the problem for you. You want to work together.
That's really key. That's really key. And so good for the child to know that their caregivers, parents and teachers, are working collaboratively to support them.
Yes.
And you mentioned that there needs to be that medical documentation, and often the doctors or psychiatrists, psychologists, they can write a list of accommodations that are specific to your child, and then you share that with the school. And when those accommodations are in place, that will alleviate some of the stress on your child that they're experiencing in school during the day. And then when they come home at the end of the day, things should be a little bit calmer, hopefully, because their school day isn't as stressful for them with those accommodations in place. That's the goal, so that they can access the curriculum more easily.
Exactly. And I mean, in addition to accessing the curriculum, there's so much that we as parents can do at home for our children, and things that we won't think of until we start talking and collaborating with the other adults in their lives, or with other professionals like occupational therapists or psychologists or coaches. So when you're really stuck, reaching out for that support is so vital. I mean, I've been there and reached out for occupational therapists and psychologists and doctors and this and that. It's the only way that you are going to be able to not only support your child, but also support yourself. Because if you don't feel supported, it's very difficult to support your child. So also recognizing that parents need to take care of themselves.
I think that's really key. I'm just jotting down what you said there. Recognizing that parents need to take care of themselves and they need to feel supported.
Yeah.
If you could offer parents just one actionable step, one thing that they can start doing today, what would it be?
I did write something down here. Yes. Okay. I didn't want to forget. So there's a strategy that some of you may know and some of you may not. It's called HALT, HALT. And it's something that I use a lot for myself, for my kids, my husband, and I do it in combination with time-stamped journaling. So now you have no idea what this is, the listeners at least. So HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So when your child is acting out, saying, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And then addressing one by one what it is. So, there are kids that act out very much when they are hungry. Is your child hungry? Okay, let's give them a snack. Are they angry? Okay, what is angering them? Why are they angry? And this goes for you too. I mean, I use this on myself. If they're lonely, maybe something happened at school, maybe they're feeling left out, socially isolated. Maybe they're feeling neglected because you're cooking dinner and they're watching TV on the couch by themselves, but they want someone to be with them. That's a common theme in our house, and it's challenging with young kids. And my husband often comes home either after dinner or just in time for it, or once they're in bed. So it means that I'm cooking dinner and trying to give my daughter that alleviate that loneliness feeling. And then there's the tired one. Well, I don't know about you, but when I'm tired, I'm laughing because it's funny, but it's not funny. I'm not a happy person. And then, okay, if your child is tired, perhaps telling them, why don't you go sit on the couch and watch a show? Maybe it's not time for TV, but they need to rest their body. Uh, Go read a book, do a puzzle. Maybe some quiet time with Lego is a good choice. There are so many different options to address that when it's not actually a time for sleep. And the journaling aspect of it comes in, okay, when do you notice these behaviors? And then writing down, okay, it's after school, we just got home, whatever time, 4 o'clock, and Johnny said he's hungry. He was yelling and screaming or jumping up and down on the couch or whatever was occurring, but detailing it so that you know, okay, at this time I saw that. Are you going to see it again tomorrow and the next day? Is this a common theme on every school day that you haven't actually picked up on because we're so busy, and we don't pick up on these patterns if we don't see them? Like if we don't actually write them down. So journaling the symptoms when they happen and what potentially could be causing them.
That's such a
And
great
you can
tip.
address them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going
Oh,
to say, and then once you have that, you can address the symptoms or the underlying cause of the symptoms.
absolutely. And it goes back to kids do well if they can. So if your child's
Yeah.
not doing well after school, there's a reason. So asking that halt, are they hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? That's a
Yeah.
great place to start. And then documenting it so you can look for patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. And Saundra, you have created a beautiful gift for our audience that I'm super excited about, the perfect ADHD daily planner. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so this is actually created for the parents in here, and it's something that I use myself. The exact, I mean, I've got it in front of me because it's on my desk and it comes with me if we travel. I am basically the perfect ADHD daily planner. It doesn't work for everyone, but for those who it does work for, it's really something to make your own. It is 2 pages that go side by side. I can show you an example actually of a blank one. I'm planned ahead. So it kind of side by side. On one side you've got like the time, and on the other side you've got the brain dump. And the time goes from 6 a.m. till 9:30 p.m. so that we can kind of, and again, not all of us are up for those exact hours, but sort of setting those boundaries of, okay, I shouldn't schedule anything after a certain time or before a certain time. I shouldn't expect anything of myself in those times. And then just writing down what your schedule is so you could see it. I like to use pencil because things change. Um, then the brain dump side is just all those things that come up in your head throughout the day, or at any time, and you just write them down. And at the bottom, there's a place for priorities. There's the work, career, chores, and then the personal stuff. So for stay-at-home parents, it's a good place to put all the household management tasks. Stay-at-home parents, and then working parents, it's a good place to use the the work stuff that needs to be done in a day. And then there's a personal side, which is, okay, what needs to be done personal, like cooking dinner? Do I need to pick up groceries? Do I need to take my child to an appointment? Um, Writing those things down, so you kind of, when you're scattered, you feel like, okay, I have my top three priorities and that's what I need to focus on right now because I can't think of anything else. So that's the top three priorities area can be very helpful, especially on those days where we're feeling exceptionally scattered.
Yeah. And I feel like just getting it out on paper is so helpful because then you're not using that mental energy to hold it in there. You can let it out and you know it's in a safe place where you can refer to it later. And
Exactly. I mean, I use this as my daily planning system and sort of my task management, but then I rely on Google Calendar and Google Tasks, and I have another system that I use for all my work projects and things like that, like my project management system. And you'll often find that you're adjusting and tweaking the way you use your systems regularly because what worked 2 months ago isn't working today, and then assessing why. So it's called the Perfect ADHD Daily Planner, and the reason it's perfect is because it is adjustable to you. You can use it as a template to create your own version of what is going to work for your life.
oh, I love that. Thank you. And I'm sure parents would love to learn more from you. Where can parents find you on social media?
Absolutely. I'd love to connect. So there's a few places. I've been very present on Instagram lately because it just seemed to be a place where people were asking questions. So you can find me on Instagram. It's my name, Saundra Brodkin. On YouTube, I have a channel and it's also my name. And then on Facebook, I have a Facebook group for ADHD women, and that is called the ADHD Women Squad. Um, I've sent all these links to Lara, so I'm sure that she will be sharing them with you. And yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And all those links are shared in the email that's attached to this interview. So
perfect.
parents have it there. Thank you so much, Saundra, for sharing your expertise in the area of ADHD in females. You're doing such wonderful work supporting women with ADHD.
Thank you.
And parents, I invite you to keep this conversation going on Facebook and my group, the ADHD Village. Under Saundra's thread, comment on what you learned today and how you will use this knowledge to bring some calm into your family or improve your communication and your connections with your child's teacher. What will your next step be? Everyone who comments on this thread will be entered to win a draw. Entered in the draw to win the VIP All Access Pass, which includes access to all the summit interviews for 1 year, the action workbook, and the Baddest 21-day challenge for kids. Thank you again, Saundra. It's been an honor to speak with you.
It's been an honor to speak with you too. Thank you so much for having me.
And parents, thanks for watching. I hope that you will join us again for the next inspiring interview with our ADHD experts. It takes a village to raise a child, especially if that child has ADHD, and I'm honored to be a part of your village. Thank you for spending this time with Saundra and myself. It takes a loving parent to make this commitment, to take the steps in creating your calm, confident, connected family. Sending you all lots of love.